because the time came. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Do you know what? Look, here comes Richard. Everyone's arriving. Hello, Richard. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. We've just started. I was just going to explain to the dear viewer that I came down to switch my computer off, and for some reason there was a StreamYard thing open in my browser. I was like, what on earth's that there for? And then I realised it's Tuesday because the wife and I all day have been thinking it's Monday. So anyway, moving on very, very swiftly. Today is not in fact Monday. Today is Tuesday, and Tuesday was the day that The Guardian put out an article that Ian was very, very much behind and responsible for. And we can say it was Richard's fault because he was on the wanted list. But happy Tuesday, Phil. And it's already garnering some response to my inbox. One of the first responses I am quite amazed at is the number of people that were contacted by the police right across the country. Doesn't matter where you live, if they could find your name, you got called. I don't know. Where should we start with this, gentlemen? Do you want to try and start with this somewhere?
I'll start a bit. I mean, I can't take that much credit for it in that the reporter just was looking up freedom of information requests, and I think had come across myself and Richard as well. And from there, we'd reached out. And funnily enough, I don't update my website and haven't for years, and I should do. But you'd first use my contact form on there. And normally all I get through that is just spam about, we'll do your SEO, or do you want some Viagra and all that? So I just automatically just delete it. I'd actually deleted her email first time around, and then it wasn't until she got in touch over Twitter that, she seemed interested. So I started chatting to her, and I got the impression, that you don't often, well, there's a perception you don't, but I don't think it's entirely true, but you don't always think you're going to get a fair hearing from the press, obviously, because we've had quite a hammering. You're initially a bit cautious, but I've always been of the opinion that if you're willing to just present facts, tell things straight as they are, any credible journalist is quite happy to present that, because at the end of the day, they don't want to put something out that's a load of nonsense. Because these days, all the journalists on Twitter, you tag them and go, "Hey, what's that on that report you've just said? It's a load of nonsense." So I think actually. I think we're often too negative. People are always saying, no, well, there's no point in me saying not positive because it won't get reported. I'll just get cut out. And this is very much the proof that actually, no, if you put a good case, you'll get a fair hearing. And I think some of the previous experience I've had has always backed up. I'm not had to date where, I've been cut off or been in any way told you've got to be saying this, you've got to be saying that. I think there's almost a perception with people thinking, oh, I've got to do that, otherwise I'll never get on air. And I want to get on air and I want to mention my company and that, so I'm going to do all the bit of the drama. And it shouldn't be that way. I think actually the industry does more harm than probably journalists, and that mindset of you've got to be negative. And in fact, I think today is very much proven. I mean, especially when the article starts off with the likes of Professor Dunn, that's his entire drone expertise of whatever that is, career is all around doing. It's almost like he just watches Terminator and films from the 80s with cyborg robots and just says, that is what drones are like now. This is what your hobbies are all up to. And it's like, well, no, that isn't the case. So, for that to be the start of the article and to bring in, negatives, and then they come out of the article at the end where actually drones get a fair hearing, and there's a lot of positivity, that I feel that comes across in what's written. I think it's a good outcome, and I think it's good to bring up the Gatwick again and just say, actually, as journalists, you could have all looked into this a lot more. There are a lot of questions to ask that just weren't asked at the time and haven't been asked since, and there was a lot of opportunity there. There were a lot of contradictions. I mean, the very fact that you got that. I think of his full title now, Chief Super Inspector, whatever he was, Tingley, that had said, there's possibly no drone. And then suddenly, he's disappeared. I mean, that in itself says, wait a minute, whenever have you seen a police officer on the case that's been there to the media and has just been disappeared overnight because he said something that's, clearly unpopular with ministers. In fact, funny enough, that was one of the things I thought, I'll stick out on Twitter because people won't be aware. But one of the questions I'd asked on the very day that he said that, I said, well, how many emails were there through the Department of Transport about Tingley? And there's over 3,000 emails. So if a government department is doing 3,000 emails about this police officer the moment he has said there's possibly no charge, you can't say that isn't political, because that is a government department. And for some reason, they seem to be very, conversing about him particularly. And
is it just Ian's audio, or is?
No, I've lost him too.
Ian, your audio's gone. Your audio's gone. Your studio's letting you down.
Come on, a guy that goes out and does the statements to the Guardian. He
to
must
the police. Yeah, but you're talking about police. Gone. Gone. That was amazing. Oh,
I hope he left something in his will for me.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, you were one of the main protagonists as well. Hang on, he's back. Hang on. Are you? In. Oh no, he's not back. Oh, yeah. They've come into his shed and picked him up and taken him away. Oh my word! Go ahead, over.
You're on mute.
No, it's still muted. You're definitely muted on the It's mute. It looks like you're muted on the screen. Hang on, let's see if I can unmute you.
I wonder how many Christmas cards I'm going to get this year with a reindeer saying you're on mute.
Yeah. See if you can unmute it from your side, mate. He's gone. Richard, well, hopefully he'll come back. They made the schoolboy error of feeling the collar of a barrister who used to work for the Civil Aviation Authority, and I think that's really a good way of summing up how you got involved.
Yeah.
Have you received any emails today about this subject?
Yeah, I have. I've received some commentary, which has been quite interesting. In fact, somebody did say that, I think you may have seen it on LinkedIn, that what was really interesting was the fact that Richard Ryan got picked up in part as a consequence of that article, because quite a lot of people just simply didn't know that was an aspect to this case. But as you rightly said, Gary, there have been many people that have been picked up. I think what we have to remember is the DFT, going back to Ian's point, this ended up being a political piece, because the DFT had to be seen to be doing something, and the police answer that question by saying, this is how many doors we've knocked on, this is how many people we've interviewed, this is who we've investigated, this is who we've got in jail wrongly. And it becomes a big statistic just to show that the police have done their job. When in actual fact, when I, as the article said, during that time, I lived in Hawley, and Hawley is just around Gatwick Airport, and I would drive down the back road. Well, it wasn't a back road, actually, it was a main A road. And I counted that night 12, 13 police cars just whizzing around. And then within a couple of days, there were bobbies placed all around the perimeter fence. Portaloos had arrived, and they were just milking the overtime like it was going out of fashion. And I drove past these guys, and I was thinking, well, how are you going to observe a drone? Even if you were to put a Phantom up, as we know, you've got a 4.3 kilometer range on it. You can go to a couple of thousand feet. So if I'm in a wooded area, a couple of K away, watching my live feed, how is a bobby on the perimeter fence going to catch me? It was just a show, just to say, look, we are doing something about it, because rightly the DFT was saying, how could this possibly happen? I think what we should be doing, in part, and this is where I think maybe the article could have provided a bit more focus on Gatwick's reaction, because I bet you your bottom dollar that the top 3 risks on the board of Gatwick would have been a drone incursion. So what were they doing over the last few years to prevent a drone from happening? And what action were they taking? Or not, as the case may be? Because I think here, I think Gatwick has been a bit remiss here because of the cost involved in defending Gatwick from a drone incursion. And I bet you it was on their risks, their top 3 risks for that board. And this is where maybe Samira, who wrote the Guardian piece, couldn't actually get any further information. I mean, I don't know how far she took the questions to Gatwick, and I'm sure she did. I mean, what she did get in that article, I thought, was a real broad view from a number of different stakeholders to represent the different positions that people had taken in and around the whole Gatwick incident. And I mean, I know some people have said, well, the article didn't really say much or something like that. Well, I would question what the intent of that person was to say that in the first place, because that was an incident. It affected hundreds of thousands of people in different ways, shape, or form. I mean, to the extent that this poor couple got wrongfully arrested. I mean, the shame in their settlement figure was the fact that I think most of it was in legal fees, which was unfortunate. You know, had they come to me, I might have done something pro bono for them. But there we go.
No, we couldn't, because you suspect can't have that.
I know. Well, that was it. At the time, I did phone up the police station and said, "Could I speak to those people in custody, please?" And they said, "No. Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm Richard Ryan. I'm a barrister, and those people in custody can have the provision of legal advice, and I want to give them some legal advice." And they said, "No, you have to be on the approved list." I said, "Okay, well, who do I speak to get on the approved list?" "I can't tell you that. It's confidential." He just thought, "Oh my God. I mean, what are we coming to here?" I mean, I think there are a lot
and then you looked at the calendar to check if you were in 1984. So it's so easy.
Yeah. I mean, it really was. I mean, they could have handled it so much better. And I thought what was really interesting is the article did talk about how many drone sightings there were subsequently, and then we had the admission by the police officer that it was most likely their own drones. Well, we all know for a fact on the second day there were 67 drone sighting reports, and they all related to the police drones. I mean, there's been no evidence to contrary that view at all. So, yeah, I mean, I'm pleased the article has come out, because I think it does need to shed further light on this matter. It definitely does. And we are approaching the anniversary of the Gatwick incident. So
we should have a party.
Yeah. Coming up for Christmas again. So, I mean,
gosh, is this only the first anniversary? What a weird year it's been. Is it?
No, 2 years.
2 years. That's right. Yeah, 2 years. Yeah. This year's kind of been wiped out, and you're back with us with your audio, Ian. That's good.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a mic over to this side, so it was going onto that rather than onto me webcam. So it wasn't MI6. It was just that's what the man with the sharp stick in your back's telling you to say.
You're already getting all of your drone equipment, Ian, in case you had been abducted for some reason.
Well, I've not invested in drones for the last at least probably a couple of years now. So I just keep to Rover at the moment. So it alluded to that in the story, but once all that Gatwick stuff came out, that was what put me off. I just thought I'm sick of this. That we're and it's all the legislation that seemed to come around.
Well, we mustn't lose sight of that, must we? That this has helped drive a narrative for both counter UAS companies, and then for things to happen. I've actually forgotten what happened. Was this the FRS's? Something got pulled forward, didn't it?
Because on the consultation, and then it was going back to the consultation response. So then the consultation response had a whole opening about Gatwick. And in fact, on the Freedom of Information request, that is specifically mentioned. It's actually the kind of like bullet point of how do we show we're doing something. It's let's bring up the consultation and obviously that had politicised it then, and that's why we saw that. I think it was at least, I think, a page at the front that started off mentioning Gatwick, and it's unfortunate as well for other countries because the UK's been used as a bit of an example, because there's this perception, well, UK, everything's by the book, and if anything wasn't quite right, it'd be out there, and so it must have happened, and so that's kind of strengthened drone legislation globally. But I don't believe we are a good example. And if what had happened at Gatwick had happened in China or in Russia, we'd all be laughing at it now and saying that's just utter nonsense. And it's only because it's in the UK that people thought, wait a minute, surely that must be right. But as we're seeing, things just don't really add up. And the very fact that there's this closed down information. In fact, in the little bits that are there, because in the last Freedom of Information, it was about 85 pages, and it's just completely loads of it redacted. And they've got to go point, they won't even show you the redactions. Said we're not even going to give you a hint of how much we're taking out of it, because using the public domain sources, you might be able to paste back together all we've cut out, like nonsense. But
you can go back and appeal the redactions, Ian. So you can go back to them and say you need to justify each one of those redactions.
Okay. Justify them.
Yeah.
Oh my word! You could get them into you could get them into 1 million hours of work, couldn't you? Having to justify each redaction.
Yeah, that's what they say.
You appeal that decision to the ICO.
Yeah. I'll have to chat to you offline about some of them and see if we can push them a bit further forward. But what was clear in it was, even the little pieces were there, that it was, that the consultation was being politicised.
But the drone bill was brought forward as well.
Yeah, and also there was an exemption with the airport, the 5 miles with the 250 grand, which suddenly just got completely reversed out of it without any consultation or any mention. It just ended up getting changed overnight. And I was thinking there was something else I'd seen in passing, but I'm not sure I can remember exactly what it was now. But yeah, there's just little snippets here and there, and you just get a feel of it. Oh yes, there was a specific instruction to the police not to engage with the media anymore with any technical information. So I think that's really fed through today with the Sussex Police not responding to the ICO. So again, that's the politicians telling the police what to say and what not to say, which is never a good sign. The police should have just been able to treat it like any other case on evidence and come back with that. And obviously they didn't like the fact that they were saying, well, there isn't any evidence. And as we're seeing to date, despite all the money that's been spent and so on, you can't prove something that was there that probably wasn't there. If no one could, as we said before, if no one could photograph it and so on, how was it ever there?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is, for anyone that is really coming in late or was living under a rock at the time, was on the first night the weather was foul. So if heaven forbid, if there was something there and it was there to do a task, I'm sure whoever was then flying it on that evening in foul weather would have carried out their task and got it done. There wasn't a requirement to wait for nicer weather and come back if it was really there. The weather was foul, and so straight away, if you're in our world, it's like, oh, that seems a little bit unlikely, without even giving it any more thought. It's like,
that's a really good point, Gary, because the Sussex Police do have IP rated drones. I can't remember the brand that they've got, but it is IP rated. Pardon?
Sky Ranger, I think.
Yes,
yeah.
So they do have those, and that kind of correlates to the reported sightings. But you're right, I do recall it being very wet that night.
Well, that was the next day, wasn't it? The Sky Rangers were the next day when they were looking on the first sighting.
One thing that worked as a good example with that was when the reporter came up to Bradford, which in itself was a bit of a funny situation, because I said, oh, there's these playing fields where all the drone flyers tended to fly from.
and I ain't been there for a year. But you don't expect something to just change in that space of time. So got there, and literally there's a 7-8 foot fence around the entire playing field. It's completely sealed off. So they basically, I don't think it's down to the drone flyers. I think it's probably people walking the dog and having a poo on the grass. But
the dog or the person.
So I think they possibly sealed it off for that. But basically, we were then stuck. It's like, oh, where do we take the drones off from? So yeah, it was a case of ad hoc trying to find some more fields to demonstrate the drones. But it was interesting with that is, we're in a September day. It was one of the better days. Obviously, we picked it because it was like, oh, well, pick the best day we can so you can see it flying. But the wind was still pretty bad. And, you could see the Mavic struggling. So we were saying then, this is, if it wasn't for the fact that you were here and coming to see them, for the fun of it, no one here would actually be flying leave it till a better day. So she obviously got, to see firsthand that actually these things aren't as robust in bad weather than the perception that was out there.
Mm.
And I made the point as well as we've discussed that for all the sightings, and the very fact that all the hark on about sightings is the fact that you would have heard it first. No one ever said, I heard a drone. And that, if there were legitimate drone sightings, that would be one of the things you specifically be reporting is actually, I've heard a drone rather than necessarily seen it first. But who knows?
What's interesting as well is at night, why didn't the plane start flying again at midnight? Because the airport doesn't really care, does it? So why didn't they just start flying again at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning?
Yeah. Well, I think that speaks to the whole response, doesn't it? And then I would like to see their bits of paper that they had for, should this happen, this is what we're going to do before. Because as Richard's correctly said, it had to be on their risk radar or whatever you want to call it. They had to have thought about it, surely. Every airport surely had to have thought about it. So, it speaks to a lot of nonsense. And what I was going to say now was, do you think we'll ever see the proper records of this and get the truth of this? Or will this be lost to the mists of time? And I must mention Will Aero's question from a little bit earlier. He said, for Ian, how do we change the public view on this? I've got an opinion on this, but I'll let Ian come to that. But do you think we'll ever see the truth of this?
Possibly not. There's the is it 50 years or whatever where official records come out. At that point, we probably will, and they'll go, "Well, see, all along I told you back then there was no drone."
We've come staying alive that long, haven't we? Then.
So until that day, no, we won't know any better. I don't think. Regards public perceptions, I think this was actually, a nice little step forward. Whether what we'll see in future, I don't know. At the moment, thankfully, the press have got a lot more things to worry about, like COVID and Brexit and so on. So drones don't even register as even worth talking about now. It's funny if you notice this year, I've not even seen the local stories because it was always press association to get clickbait. Would sell the story to all the locals, and every local paper would say, "Oh, we've got 50% extra drone sightings," even though that 50% was because 6 going to 12. Or actually,
yes, yeah, that's right. 100% increase. Yes.
This year,
the truth.
Yeah, this year, no one's even thought even that's worth bothering. It's almost, and I hope it stays that way. It's almost getting that kind of story where they're like, "Oh well, we've milked this one to death. Is there any more?" In fact, there was just a question there about Aldo Kane, but I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah, I'll put it back up. There it is. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
there was that one.
I didn't really see the retraction, although I got the feeling that he was trying to back out slightly. But that was just purely because of all the PIFCOs and general drone community jumping up and down and saying what you're playing at. But then again, that's again is someone that's supposedly, drone professional going in and knowing full well that they're presenting the drone community in a very bad light. I mean, quite happy to do that just because they're getting some airtime, which I think is really incredibly disappointing.
And Mark's making a point which I've kept up there, and I did hear from a couple of places that it was some other form of operation. And as I said at the time, if you could change the channel on the TV in the restroom remotely, or switch the or get the vending machine to spew Mars bars out in the restroom, that would panic. You don't need to hack into critical infrastructure systems. You just need access to some part of the system, and that would scare the bejesus out of people. And that is where I think our Mark's comment about why they didn't keep flying. I've more than 2 people have told me that's what it was. That's what I was saying. And one of them wasn't in the UK. So
the strange thing with Gatwick, from speaking to some reporters prior to that, was they were all under the impression that the way, the fact the airport was closed for so long was that the drone was continually flying about, being a continual menace for those several hours. But it's quite clear from the DFT's own communications, they were saying, well, we haven't had a drone sighting for 12 hours. So there was periods where the airport was completely closed down and there were no further drone sightings. So it wasn't even continually flying. So to me, I mean, maybe again, this is why things are being a bit pushed up, because someone should be asking the question, well, how come you had the whole place closed down for several hours when there wasn't a sighting in that time? Doesn't that seem an overreaction? And that's obviously got a financial cost, and the financial cost to those airlines. But those are the questions that haven't been addressed.
I think on that point, my view is that they could have done something about this, but they were completely unprepared. And the reason why they were unprepared is because Gatwick was not open and honest about what that risk was on their risk register and what that cost would be to their business. Lo and behold, the cost is now tens of millions, which I'm sure they are insured against, and have probably recovered most of that loss. But what hasn't happened is all of those people that were disrupted, all the people that are affected by it, have not had that level of compensation in the right way, because just simply they wouldn't have got it for whatever reason. And what it has highlighted is the fact that Sussex Police clearly did not have a proper plan in place to deal with these kind of incidents. And it had to go up to state level in order for the military to get involved and provide some degree of assurance as to where we are now and how we can deal with it in the future in relation to the technology that can be used to prevent drones from flying in that airspace. But it took all of that to happen. And in my view, that all happened in an inconsistent manner and took far too long to do. Because as you just said, there's 12 hours there where there were no drone sightings at all. That during that period of time, that would have been an ideal time. And that was at the end of the second day, where we could have got people involved and sorted the whole thing out, and it wouldn't have had to go on for days like it did and cause the loss of tens of millions of pounds.
If you was the insurer then for Gatwick right now, and you saw there was no drone or anything, would you go back for your money and go, hang on a minute, it's your error, not ours? Could the insurer go back and go, we want our money back? I wonder if that's possible, because no drone, mismanagement, mismanagement is not an insurance thing, is it?
Yeah, it might not be specifically related to drone. It could be just business interruption. I don't know. I mean, it depends on what the terms of the insurance are. I mean, I have no idea. I'd imagine they have got some form of insurance in place for that kind of business interruption where they have to ground flights for whatever it may be. But the fact is, because the government then got involved, they could probably use that as an argument to say, look, the government's here now and they're dealing with it.
They said don't fly. Yeah.
because it's now become so much of a public and international policy issue that they've got to be dealing with this threat in the right way. And then lo and behold, a few weeks later, we see similar stuff resonating in Heathrow, and that was dealt with quite expediently. So clearly lessons were learned. It'd be interesting, Ian, in your FOI requests, how you might be able to correlate the two through further FOI requests, if that makes sense.
Well, the next one was actually Birmingham, wasn't it? That was it went Gatwick, Birmingham, Heathrow. Was the order it went. And what surprised me is people said that those very special soldiers that you never wanted to meet in a bar were on their way and the Chinooks were going, but none of that actually happened. I think in the end, they didn't actually, and assets that the Air Force have weren't activated. So it really is it's like they weren't serious enough. I didn't put that very well. It's like if they really thought there was a clear and definite threat from some really, really bad people, then all sorts of assets wouldn't move, and they didn't move. And that was on the first day. And that's like, oh, okay.
But the focus of law enforcement up to that point was completely misaligned, because it was all on how can we use drones to benefit police, and how can we prosecute or catch those people that are smuggling contraband into prisons, which led to the drone bill. It wasn't about, although the counter drone piece was in the background, I'm sure there were law enforcement people working on the counter drone piece, but it never had the prominence that it does have now. And so because of that, it was never in their focus, Gary, and then we saw a completely unprepared plan. I mean, who in their right mind today would say, you know what I'm going to do? Oh, we've had drone sightings over a nuclear power station or a prison or an airport. I know, I'm going to get the local police force down and they can send their drones up and find the drone. I mean, you know, come on. You know, we know the technology and we all appreciate it. How is a camera on one drone going to find another drone 2 clicks away? I mean, really, it just is a complete naive approach to the way that one would deal with that threat. And all they had to do was look past the end of their nose, and there was plenty of information out there. There were companies knocking on the airport doors saying, look, we've got solutions for this threat. But they didn't want to listen because of the cost. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
I think it is probably very likely to be a Keystone Cops event, with the police unfortunately having to toe the party line once the parties got involved, as it were. Once the government got involved, I'm sure they got themselves into a place they didn't want to be. Yeah. And would quickly have walked away from it if it. It's fun days. But it's made a heck of a difference to our industry. I really think it has.
It has, because when I listened to Baroness Sugg, who at the time was the minister responsible, talking and answering questions in the House of Lords, she did not have a clue about how to deal with those questions in terms of giving proper and full answers. And that,
but she must have done because she had, was it her that had the advice? Which one of them had the PFCO in their pocket? One of them had the PFCO advising them, didn't they, Ian, I think? Or are we not talking about this?
Yes. One thing the Freedom of Information has revealed is there was a PIFCO that has the direct ear of Baroness Sugg that was saying, "Oh, this is my views on what's going on," which I don't know whether it depended who it was and what the motivations were. But I'd be very worried if someone has a business model that, you know, benefits from hysteria around drones, for example, and then you're
surely there couldn't be anyone like
so
that.
On. It's you know then you've got to think, how good is the information going across, and you've also got people that like to sort of close the door behind us all of, well, we've got a PIFCO now. I don't want anyone else coming into the market, and I want to stop that with legislation. And then we'll just go, hobbyists. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're going to take down the red arrows and stuff. And we need to put all these layers of legislation in place. Where really the motivation is, I don't want any local competition against my business model. So yeah, that was just one of the funny little things that you end up stumbling across.
Yeah.
Oh, wait for remote ID. Oh, that's going to be so much fun.
Well, very sadly, down here, we had one group of people in our commercialization process of South Africa that sort of took over and wanted to rule the world, and firmly shut the door behind them. And this last month, they've got hold of the idea of remote ID and UTM in their little minds. And they've just been spouting at a conference here, and they're going to be the leaders. And they are the people that want, as they're going, no, they're not going to be the leaders, because we all know it exists and it's a thing, but they are telling our aviation authority again and shutting the door. And yeah, anyway, am I getting on my high horse? I'm getting on my high horse, but I can see history repeating itself. And luckily, if you don't, in some ways, I don't have a hat in a ring. I'm not operating commercially, and so that means I can say what I like about it. It doesn't matter. It's not going to directly affect me earning money. And I'm seeing the same people lining themselves up to run another little scam on the industry down here. And I'm sure that to a certain degree applies over there as well, rather than a rising tide lifts all boats. People just want to, I can't think of an analogy to go with that. Perhaps a barrister would need to help me out with some clever phrase, but they're just in it for themselves, and it doesn't work in the end. Rant ends. Let's just move away from Gatwick, because Louis here, and he hates Gatwick as a subject. He absolutely hates it.
Really, Louis?
He does. He hates it, which is fair enough. But you did a fantastic job, and in the end, with your FOA's awesome source, it is holding their feet to the fire, and Richard as well of power. And to my dying day, I think I'd say the story. I cannot believe the police felt the collar of the CIA barrister. Wrong person.
Just one thing, Gary, before we move on, you should use the opportunity today on your Twitter account to tweet out your YouTube on raising the FOI request and get a few more people doing it.
Oh yeah, could do that. Yeah, you know how switched I am. How switched on I am with all these things, Ian. I'm at the cutting edge of promotion. I am cutting edge. Yes, we did. Ian and I did do. There's I can't remember what's the name of that website, Ian.
It's whatdotheyknow.com.
Whatdotheyknow.com will lead you through doing FOA requests, and it's very good. It's just the ticket. Yeah, it's worth doing. It's really hard. But anyway, the next one I want to jump onto quickly before we go on to the buffoon. Have we all seen the buffoon in America who's getting a huge fine? But we'll come on to that in a minute. He's a buffoon. And I don't say that lightly, because I think I'm a buffoon as well, and hopefully we are all a little bit buffoonish, but he is the king. But anyway, before that, there's a company that stood up, and I have to put there. I have to find a link to see. Oh, Dronomics. I wish companies would use names we could pronounce, but they're standing up. A delivery drone with a 2,500 kilometer range to range right across Europe and do stuff. How on earth are they going to manage that? It's a pretty bold press release, I reckon. You're coming in on this, Mark.
This is really interesting. We're going to have these drones. I thought they were going to be the Cessnas. So they did the Cessna cargo plane, didn't they?
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be those they were using, but it's not, is it? It doesn't quite look like a cargo plane, does it? For if you think of one in my head, but I think it's really interesting. They reckon they've got 5 sites, 5 countries signed up.
Yeah,
something.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, UK's world leading." Well, we're not one of the 5, so we're not.
Well, not in Europe, are you anymore? So you can't be.
Well, no, we are part of Europe. We can't cut ourselves off the continental shelf. We are part of Europe, and we're just not in the political system.
Okay, yes, good answer. Good answer. But
I think it's fantastic, to some degree. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be whoever's going to monitor all this. I mean, obviously the aircraft are going to be certified. There'll be a full maintenance regime, and the pilots will probably come from a manned aviation background, because our UKCA have said for this kind of thing that's going on, if it was to happen here, they want the pilots to be certified to sort of manned aviation sort of level for flying people and airline pilot sort of certification, at least sort of parallel, not the same because you can't quite get the same, but close to. Well, I think it's a cracking thing, really.
And ATPL's always been a requirement for the high altitude persistent staff and a few other projects that are around. But are we really going to want legacy aviators hanging around in our world, in our modern, brave new world? Do they really bring valuable skills, or do they just bring a set of gold bars?
Well, as long as they're not the ones that go, I've seen a drone every time they see a bird. I don't mind. I'm getting quite hacked off with the Balper. Sorry, Richard, with the Balper COVID-based. Quick, we better turn and face that way. That's going on. It's like, no, Balper, on your bike, get out of here.
I have no time for Balper at all. They're so two-faced, it's unreal. Anti-drone. All the pilots have lost their jobs because of COVID.
Love drones.
Well, to be honest, that was a comment I'd said right at the start of the COVID thing when pilots started losing the job. It felt a bit crud, but I had to say, because I'm like, just think if you hadn't spent all these years targeting drones and being negative about them, there'd be an industry there for you to step into. Whereas they'll find now there isn't, we're already, I mean, everyone else have views on this, but it does feel that we're at a saturation point. I don't see how you get much within what the drones we've got now and the tasks that you can do. There's not much more you could manpower you could stick into that industry. You'd have to have new use cases.
I think there will be uses for those pilots in the next maybe 3 to 5 years as we start seeing more around the UAM space, where we're dealing more with cargo and transporting people, and we're starting to see some proper demonstrations being planned. And I think there are obviously transferable skills for a pilot to come in and do that, but that will then be limited again, because once autonomy comes in to a degree where it meets the regulators' requirements on safety, the days are numbered, really. And I think, and then what we'll then start seeing is those pilots that have been fortunate enough to get into the UAM space, transitioning back into containers that are managing, say, 40 or 50 of these things flying around the air or observing them because of their experience and familiarity of them. But those that don't get in, or right at the front end, I think are going to lose out and should be looking for something else, and that could be, that could be more training. Yeah, I mean, it could be those kind of things.
Also, sorry, go on, Richard.
I was going to say, but there are other skills that they could be useful in terms of their skill base, whether it's training or maybe other startups or just getting in on that space around planning, flight planning, for example, because they have to do an element of flight planning. But when I looked at today, I picked up a memorandum that came out of the Amsterdam Drones Show, and it talked about using local regulators. Now, I've written about this before and how important local regulators are going to be, but the legislation that's coming down the pipeline is actually quite concerning, especially from the EU space. So you're going to have EU space law, then you're going to have national law, then you're going to have local regulator law, all of that's got to tie in to EU U-Space, as well as anything else that comes to play around non-aviation law, like data privacy, like trespass, some of the stuff that we see today. So we're going to have and some of that is only going to be city-based and regional-based. And what they're saying is that cities and regions can become competent authorities.
I've heard this. I've heard that, let's say, the National Trust has got a problem with ARPAs, and they'll be able to sort of ask for and get some for ARPAs only or UAS only, some restricted airspace above their site, which you'll then be subject to prosecution should you get it. Whereas if I rush across in my aeroplane, I'll be all right, manned. But if I fly my Mavic across, then I'll be in trouble.
Unless, of course, because of ID and your ID being registered onto some form of U-Space or UTM platform, when you do fly into that airspace, ka-ching, an automatic charge will apply.
How very dare you suggest such a thing? That'll never happen. There's nobody in this world that will ever think that's a good idea. What a load of rubbish. I'll certainly not, Mr. Barrister. That'll never happen.
I
Or
think
maybe it will.
Not allowed in this.
Or maybe it will.
I see Richard's skills becoming very popular come 2022. So once we get remote ID, and that kicks in, because in CAP 722 it's quite clearly they throw out security. Well, they keep security, I think it is, but they throw out safety, and it says law enforcement 100%. That's what it says. Remote ID is for. You're going to be very busy, Richard.
It kills me that we have to pay £9 a year. I mean, talk about easy income. When you're a PFCO holder, you shouldn't be paying £9 a year. They've got all the data that you need and more. Why is it that people are having to pay £9 a year? I mean, we should have gone the Ben Shulman way and say, look, everybody needs to register. It should be for free.
Well, so operator ID this year won't probably change, but you're going to get a new operator ID come next time round because of YASA, right? So you're going to get a new operator ID, and it'll be GB. It'll say GB in it or something.
Yeah.
Okay. And then your flyer ID, the new flyer ID is going to do the same thing. It's going to change, but it's valid for 5 years. And the demarcation system is going to get a few changes. So someone's going to go, shh. You're going to be able to put all your details in, all your certificate information in if you want to. So all your stuff can be in flyer ID. And then if someone sees you, they can then go, shh, look at the system and go, they don't have permission to be here, so we can send them the fine.
Yeah. The problem I have with this, and I looked into it the first time I had to register, was a privacy policy. And I dug quite deep. And it goes out to a third-party company, which is American, I believe.
Now.
And so how secure is my data going to be in the hands of a third party?
Equifax you're thinking of? Because I know they handle the drone database.
But how can it leave the UK with GDPR?
Well,
it doesn't matter anymore, not part of the EU.
Oh, their laws are
The same law's transitioning over.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting then, Richard, so I don't know if this is quite right, and I may have read something wrong, so it's something to be looked at. It might be possible for an operator, so Richard will be able to look up me and see what I'm allowed to do and see if I'm registered. It may be possible that operator can check out operator. But you imagine remote ID, so your drone's flying around. So let's say Ian decides to get a little Raspberry Pi, and it sucks up the information about all the drones that fly in the area. He could then start reporting those people, or he could just suck up all that data and go, this person always flies here. Have they got a client here? Oh, I can steal this information and go after their client.
Right, Mark, stop talking about our new business. Stop it, Mark. Stop it.
I mean, I've heard of companies designing apps so that they can see other drones in the air and warn people of it and this kind of nonsense. That's going to fail because of the data issues that that are implicitly involved in such a thing. That's on
Sorry,
the
what do you
company.
mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, Richard? What do you mean that would fail? I didn't understand that bit.
Because it's Mark's point. If you've got a drone in the air that's hoovering up all the data from other drones, which link back to a person, that then potentially becomes personally identifiable information, and
Yes.
that's where GDPR really does kick in. But if I just, before you jump in, Mark, and I know you're on the edge of your seat and about to fall off, but just 1 second. When you put in the registration of a car in the UK, it does not give you personal identifiable information. It just gives you the make and model of that vehicle, right? So for when you go to hire, I don't know, so when you go and put it in for a valuation or wherever it's going to be, why is it then that we feel it necessary that if I put in a drone registration number or something like that, suddenly I get all of your data? That cannot be right.
But weren't you weren't you the man at the CAA doing law?
Yeah, it's your fault, isn't it?
Yes, I got a minute, Richard.
I wasn't drone registration, but that was after my time, I should say.
Yeah.
But
they must have had these conversations. This can't have been. You can't be the only barrister in the UK that's thought about this.
No.
Here's one for you.
Well, I am the only barrister in the UK that has thought about it. There might have been solicitors that have thought about it too.
Here's one for you then, Richard. So with the remote ID, because it has to give the pilot's location, it's physically saying you're here, and it's giving your name because it's got the operator ID. Is that a breach of GDPR?
It's a really good point, because when you look at CCTV information, if you're looking for somebody on there and you can recognize that person's face, that's captured as data under GDPR, right? So it's in certain circumstances, and I'm not talking necessarily public stuff, but also private stuff. But I think if in any way you can attribute that to a person, I think it's going to cause a problem. But it's difficult to say because we don't know what that data is right now in order to apply it to the GDPR provisions.
Well, we do know that it's going to give the operator ID, which is linked to a name. So it's going to give that, and it's going to give the place, the location and timestamp where the drone took off from, and its flight path. So literally, it means that a copper can look you up, follow it back, or it could be accessible by anyone. We don't know yet, but it could be a copper. Must be nice. They could come up to you, literally say, "Right, Richard, so you're flying your drone. I want to see all your paperwork now, please."
Yeah, I mean that to me sounds similar to an ANPR process. If I go through the Dartford toll, time and date stamps when I've gone through it because the cameras have captured my registration vehicle details, right?
Yeah.
For law enforcement purposes only. Now, a person should not be able to get hold of that information because that is data that's personal to you and your movement. Okay, because don't forget, the interesting provision here is under Article 8 of the European Convention of Human Rights, we have the right to private and family life. But how we're going to take on that regulatory regime when we finish the transition at the end of this month. But we have heard the government talk about the European Convention of Human Rights and wanting to scrap it. So if they do that, what are the implications going to be? But my view is for law enforcement, that might be a necessary evil. And you're right, I've gone through CAP 722 myself, and I looked at that and I thought that's lining it up for the future to tie in with the drone bill, so that police will then have potentially the evidence that they need to confiscate your equipment or whatever it is that they need to do under those powers. So it's definitely lining it up because it talks about not only data that it's captured, but also digitized data as well, isn't it? In terms of capturing your location and everything else. I see why they would want that information for, law enforcement purposes. But for me personally, I think that's a step too far.
What's also interesting then, so today I learned the A&O is getting fully rewritten. So the A&O under the UK, Articles 94 and 95 will be dead. They are going to be all scrunched up. They're thrown away and the new articles will come in, and I'm just trying to remember the numbers, something like 243 onwards, but they're taking all the other stuff. It comes in, it will fit in. So the A&O is getting fully rewritten, but interestingly, they've now got it in black and white that if you're not registered, so if you don't register your drone and the police do catch you with an unregistered drone, they can fine you on the spot. Basically, it's going to be written into law that they can fine if you break the rules. 100%. No grey area anymore. You've not registered, fine. You're flying in the flight restriction zone, fine. You know, unless you can prove you got permission, of course. So
So where they've missed a trick here in the current drone bill is they haven't excluded PFCO holders. So we're all captured by that. So if Mr. Bobby comes along and the premise is that every police officer in the UK will know the drone bill, but if I showed him my registration document, my operations manual, and my permit for commercial operations, they won't know what that means.
No. And you imagine you have an OSC, so you can fly at reduced distances.
Yeah.
They're not going to have a Scooby.
Yeah, and you know, take along your previous example. You know, they know my location, but hold on a minute, I'm flying a BV loss flight. I've got an OSC to do that. So what happens when you go down and get prosecuted, and then they find out later, because now they're listening, that you've got an OSC? What happens then? When you've lost your next week's worth of jobs because all your equipment's been confiscated. Because they can confiscate it, and at the moment, the only way of getting that equipment back is to instruct somebody like me to go to the Crown Court and apply to a judge to get it back.
I'll be calling you later.
Well, have you you know, you don't have to answer this, but you probably would know how to do this anyway because it's your job. But are you like thinking ahead and thinking, well, I need to have this lot of paperwork ready and this lot of paperwork ready because people are going to be knocking at my door for this very service?
Yeah, I am to a degree, Gary. I mean, that's also one of the reasons why I'm doing a PhD in drone law, because the multi-layered approach to regulation is going to become so much more complex. It really is. And how liability is going to be apportioned. Does it come down? Will liability flow all the way back down to the drone operator who's flying that day? And lo and behold, it then hits his insurance because he can't afford to pay it himself, or she can't afford to pay it herself. It hits their insurance, the premiums go up and everything else. And that's ultimately what we're talking about here, because the regulator's not going to accept liability. The UAS operations service provider, if you take the FAA example of it, is going to offset liability somewhere. They're getting all the information in that they can, which has got to be accurate, and they've got service level agreements in place with all those companies that are providing them with the information. So the minute the information is not provided or can be proven to be not up to date or accurate, they can offset liability that way. And then lo and behold, it comes down to the insurance operator. Because, for example, I talked about this the other day. If you've got permissions, and by this time permissions are automatic, as we're seeing in the US, you can get certain permissions, can't you now, on a quick application. And the meteorological data at the moment is not fed into that. But we've seen apps whereby you can have the meteorological data, it'll give you a green or a red to fly in your location. What happens if during a flight it turns red and you're still flying and something happens and the data is not accurate or is, depending on what side of the fence you're arguing on, and you have a crash? Whose fault is it? Well, who's liable? Because at the time of flight, when I took off, it was green. Now that meteorological data is being fed in.
Yes, I think that is a super grey and dangerous area for our world for shall we say, newbies, as they say on the internet, to rely on those sort of apps and things for their
Insurers are relying on that. Insurers will be relying on that exact thing. That data, insurers will rely on. So you're 1 minute you are covered by your insurance, the next minute you might not be. Because if you do have a claim, the insurers could say, oh, hang on a minute, we checked the time of the flight, the meteorological data changed from green to red. You should have grounded your aircraft, but you didn't. I'm not paying.
I wonder what the situation is in the manned world now. As I fly along and the weather changes as I fly and I have an incident, I suppose the insurers will not cover it. I think I've answered it for myself.
I don't want to name names with insurance companies, but we know there is at least one where it's all app based, and that would. You're quite right. Then, if everything's done on the data on the fly, they're going to look at the data sources that they have, and we've seen already in the drone world the data sources. I was never a fan of AirMap for the data they had, and they won't be alone. But the data is often very, very wrong, very out of date. Because a lot of drone pilots complain. They have an airport or heliport that's been closed down for 10 years. And it's still flagged as a no-fly zone. But you would get the same kind of issues, like you say. The weather's a good example, but there'll be others over where you can and can't fly, and you'll be thinking, actually, I can fly here. Insurance company's data says no, you can't, and they won't pay out. But I've heard of people already on using the fly as you go apps, not having insurance claims paid out, where maybe if they were paying an annual subscription, they would have been paid out. Because that's the thing, again, if you're on just an app and you're just paying £5 for that flight, the insurance company's making a much bigger loss than if you've been paying an annual fee and you've been with them 5-10 years. They'll look at it a bit more, I would have thought, a bit more pragmatically, because they'll know you've been a long-term customer and they'll know a history with you, where with an app you're not necessarily going to have that, and it'll just be a case of this customer's only worth £5 to us. We're not going to pay them out of a few thousand.
Yeah, one of the reasons why they take that model, Ian, is because they need the data at the moment to be able to price in that amount of risk, and what they're banking on in the future, as we've seen in some reports, whereby in 10 years' time there'll be 30,000 flights over one particular city. So it really does become a volume-based business, and it will just keep on cashing in. But at the moment, what they need to do is make their risk profiler within their platform more informed by the data that they're using now, in order to be able to construct that in the future, so that it is more accurate and is more efficient, and will not only drive the cost of insurance down, but on a volume basis will make a ton of cash. So yeah, lots going on, I think, in terms of regulation, definitely much down the pipeline. And I think, talking to Mark's point, the article, the ANA probably does need to be rewritten on reflection, because we've had a number of substantial changes now, and it'll be interesting to see how they cope with that. But my view is, and it has been since I did that template letter, so if anybody watching now wants to write to their MP, there's a template letter on my website that you can write to your MP on. In fact, Gary's also published it on his site too, about how to request changes to the drone bill. But I would certainly say that we need to be more proactive in what we do, and by that I mean the DFT could take a real bold view here and cherry pick some of the EASA regulation, which is really good, and discard the rest. Make the UK much more competitive in terms of BV loss and everything else, that it brings other companies from the EU to our shores and drives up our business and our market, and make those bold moves happen. And I think that we could really take competitive advantage in this, and we're not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you could. There are platforms now. We're in a situation where the technology is there that I could be in. I don't know. I guess I'm just pulling this out of the backside, really. But I firmly believe you could be flying from Birmingham and your platform could go to either the west or the east coast now, and that's a platform I could build and make as as not a bajillionaire. So we've gone beyond the point where the technology wasn't there to do it and do it safely. It's there, and it needs to be leveraged now. And it's there with a reasonable cost and certainly safety. Good.
I mean, we could be sat here. I'm in the UK. Gary, you're in
Africa.
You're
Here,
in Africa.
down here, down the bottom, down there. Yeah.
So literally, you could take a plane out, put an aircraft out, put it outside. I could sit here in the UK. You could connect it up for me, put the batteries in it. You could back inside, tell me clear for takeoff. I can push a button. I could have a joystick. I could fly that aircraft, come back. You can watch it land, change my batteries again for me, and off I go again. That's all possible today. It's not hard. But, you know, I think the YASA regs, what we've got, that's what we're getting now. With the drone bill, I'm afraid, what we get with the A&O with its rewrite, it's now going to happen as they've got it.
There is a mining company, if I look through that window there, it's operating in Lesotho, that commands the RPAS that it's flying there from Australia. It's exactly doing it now. They're doing it right now. That's what all that the bloke does is take it out and he puts it on a picnic table at the front of the mine with the batteries on it, and everything's run from Australia.
And you can be sure if the pilot in Australia crashes it, he'll be taking liability.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And sorry, Africa.
Definitely. It was, and it's operating above 10,000 feet as well.
I mean, it's got to get to the point. It has got to get to the point, hasn't it? Where, I mean, when I worked for the CAA, you know, I ratified a number of BV loss permissions. You know, I looked through them and assessed them and everything else. But it's got to get to the point where the CAA have had enough use cases now to be more informed. You know, at what point do we say that we're there now, that we don't need TDAs, we don't need any more trials in danger areas? You know, where do we get to that point is what I'm not seeing right now. And we've got a number of use cases coming through again on the whole future flight piece. You know, we've got to get there. You know, and this is where I think we're missing a trick in the UK. If the regulator was to come out and say, look, we're going to be quite happy about X, Y, and Z, they can take the leading foot away from the EU on this, and we're seeing a number of EU jurisdictions, especially in Germany and Holland, doing some really good work around BV loss now and starting to really make things happen. And you know, as much as I'd like the UK to be a leading light, and it used to be years ago, I think in this domain, it isn't no longer.
Interestingly, I can't say too much, but interestingly, trust me, the CA are working exactly on what you're talking about, Richard. Today, I was in the RAE CAA meeting thing where they say what the plans are and they lay stuff out. And what you've just said is kind of laid out. And, you know, the PDRAs that exist, they want to do it. They will eventually, they want a BV loss or, you know, an EV loss. You know, they want certain things to be possible.
I think
they have got it kind of in their plan, what they, you know, but it's just taking time. And as we know, if you dawdle in today's world, you're yesterday's news.
Yeah, the PDRAs that came out in Cap 722, in my view, were a bit disappointing. They could have done more on that. Absolutely.
I took up the second one with the heavy aircraft. I did take that up with the CA. I says, hang on a minute, this can only be multi-rotor. Where's the fixed wing? You know, I can't get a fixed wing to fly like this. So if you're to test a cargo fixed wing, you can't do it. And they tried telling me it's designed for simple aircraft. And I went, I'm sorry, fixed wing aircraft. I put a receiver in it. I put an engine in it. Fly like a model plane. What's more basic? You know, but because of the speed restrictions you're given and the distances, I can't fly a fixed wing. All you're doing is circles, but I can't fly that slow. It just doesn't work. And they came back, oh, it is multi-rotor only. And it's like, you missed the trick.
Yeah, I definitely.
But they don't see that because everything they seem to think that everything's multi-rotor based. A lot of people are all multi-rotor focused. And it's not. If you want to do these cargo flights and you want like little hubs around the country for cargo, you want to fly something like a fixed wing, a Cessna or something. You don't want multi-rotors doing it. They haven't got the endurance or the payload capacity. Stick it in the back of those cargo Cessnas, have them ferrying up and down the country. You'd save loads of hassle.
Well, FedEx have been pushing for that in America for donkey's years. They want to kick out, and that's going to be, forget COVID. That's really going to be Balpa's issue, is when FedEx and Co. Because at the moment, that's the job you do when you're hour building. You're a 20-year-old and you've got to build your hours. You fly that cargo flight overnight, and FedEx wants you out of that aeroplane because you're just money, and it's another 100 kilos of cargo you can put in the plane if you're not in it anymore. And they've been desperate for that for years. So that is going to come one way or another, and it's going to be. It would be very interesting to track the storyline with Balpa, with their hatred, and now that they all want to be love and love and love, they'll probably be lobbying for BV loss flights for ATPL rated pilots as fast as possible, please.
Yeah.
So it'll be probably very interesting.
They can easily mitigate the risk on that as well, Gary, can't they? Because what they can do is take off on the east coast of America in a remote place because they filled up the aircraft. They've conditioned the aircraft to fly autonomously, and then land on the west coast of England again in a remote place. So all they've done is go over the sea. And once they do more and more of that, get the data from it, and get the safety assurances in place, it's only a matter of time before then that spreads regionally.
Yeah. And just go airways. They'd just go airways, wouldn't they? They just go in the airway system, the whole thing, and just fly it, twiddle the knobs, do the stuff.
Yeah.
Do your HF radio and everything. You just go airways. And you would even do that within the UK. And of course, a few years ago, British Aerospace did do that, didn't they? From I want to say Wharton up to somewhere in Scotland with Jetstream. They did have somebody on board, but it did fly autonomously that far. Maybe you were a part of that, Richard. I don't know. So it's we're hopping and skipping away from all of this, aren't we? It's going to happen. It's going to be.
For me, I mean, so where I live, the Red Arrows are literally a stone's throw from where I live.
Hey, don't you go throwing stones at the Red Arrows that you won't win no friends there.
So RAF Scampton's going to shut in a couple of years' time, and they're going to move the Reds away, and they're going to Warrington, okay, which is over there, a few miles over there. Scampton over there, I've got Warrington over there. What would be interesting is Scampton, they could turn into one of these hubs for cargo deliveries in and out of the area. It would make perfect sense. You know, you could link it down to one down south. It just makes sense, you know, but it's going to get ripped up, isn't it? And they're going to destroy it and turn it into houses or something. But yeah,
probably. Yeah. Well, Fittingly can't be far away. That's now East Midlands or something, isn't it? But everything's the drones are at everything's going to be at. Well, maybe the whole Air Force could be at Waddington now. I think the Air Force is quite small these days, isn't it? So maybe it's all going to be at Waddington.
Well, the army in the UK is a militia, technically. I think under 100,000, it's a militia, isn't it?
Is it?
I don't know. Don't quote me on that.
We have to have 100,000 for a standing army. We don't have that. Don't tell anyone, but we don't have a standing army.
Well, they'll tell you that, of course, and quite rightly, that today's modern army and air force are very highly skilled and trained people. They're not just people running around with bang sticks. So they have the power of multiple people 100 or 200 years ago. Would be my way of trying to get around that in the press.
I think that Scotchman as well was saying, "Oh well, we're going to do away with tanks as well." It's like, well, what we're going to have left?
You don't. All you need is drones now. All you need is drones, because all you do is you have a shed load of, you have a drone swarm. You go, that city, right? Anyone that's holding a gun dies. Off you go, drones. So anyone that's holding a gun shape, they just die. So that's all you tell.
Have you been talking to Professor Dunn?
No, you go in with the body bags. Clean out the bodies, jobs are good. You can then go, that ship over there, flatten it for me. That ship's now gone, that building's gone, whatever you want. You don't need to send people anymore. If you don't want to, smart tech is here now.
Smart tech. Oh God,
Sorry.
I am getting old.
What it tells me is how advanced the vision was in Terminator.
Sign is here.
It's Michael Crichton who did Jurassic Park and that. He had
What has it got?
predicted on
Dinosaurs
most
now,
of this.
not soldiers?
What's that?
Has it got dinosaurs now, not soldiers? Is that what happened?
That's just the one film that people will know, but he done because we've talked about this before. I think because we said I think it's the first film where you've genuinely got a multi-rotor idea, which was I think 1984. Tom Selleck called Runaway, and that was one of them he'd written. So basically, it's police having a drone which they fly into a house. To observe what's going on beforehand, but he predicted like the mobile phone and a whole. It's worth just googling and check what he predicted. But the guy was really ahead of his time. If instead of doing films about it all, he just patented it all, he'd have been really minty.
Oh, patents. Now, I did want to get on to before we go. I did want to mention. Hang on, I need to share a screen. I did want to mention this chap here. Who has, hang on, Chrome tab, there it is there. This chap here, as he come up.
Oh, we've got the music video. There is a Gatwick music video, Gatwick drone.
Yes.
You're supposed to squeeze that in.
I'll do that. I should have started that completely. Well, mine, if you'd been, I'd completely forgotten I was doing this tonight. So, but that chap, he has been, the FAA have done exactly what they did to a company, a few years ago now, of toting up lots of little fines and turning it into an enormous fine. And he's up for $182,000 in fines. And he's claiming ignorance. Now he's putting out videos saying things like, I only learned 2 days ago there was a LANC system, and I only learned last week that we can't fly above 400 feet, and I only. And perhaps, Richard, I could lean on you yet again to explain why ignorance is no defense. If I'm right in thinking that, maybe I'm ignorant in thinking that.
No, you're not at all. No, ignorance is no defense of the law, because if it was, then nobody would be guilty of anything. Because you just very collar felt, I didn't know about that. Sorry, no, I didn't know about that. Everybody has a duty to know, how law affects them in certain ways, and that's part of that process of getting into something like this, isn't it? You just don't buy a drone from a shop and say, I'm going to fly this willy-nilly without having any responsibility at all for anything, especially in the States. You've got a responsibility for everything you do.
Now there's a future guest, Steve Dixon, full throttle aerial, Scorpion XL. I don't know if people have seen that on LinkedIn. Have a look on LinkedIn. Have a knockabout and try and find that platform. It's enormous. It's an enormous multi-rotor. Good evening to you, Steve. And not only so he started bleating about it, and he's got to respond to the FAA by the 5th of December, and he started making a noise and sort of, dear YouTube, dear internet world, help. It's a bit late, mate. If you received a letter from any authority, again, Richard, what would your immediate action drill be for that?
From the authority saying
something, you've done something wrong. It doesn't matter, whatever it is. You've done something wrong. We want to have a word.
Yeah, you've got to respond, haven't you? You've got to respond and say, hello, authority, what is it you think I've done wrong? Please help me or educate me or tell me what it is. You'd go to their website at the very least, wouldn't you? All the regulators now have something about drones on their website. I mean, I'm sure they do. I mean, if they don't, then they're definitely in an immature jurisdiction when it comes to drones. So maybe a good place to do some flight tests if you've got a new platform. But if they've got a website, you must know. Or in the community, if you're reaching out to people on social media, you only have to go to social media and put in drone law or drone regulation, and a ton of stuff will come up. make you much more informed about it. I would, if he's got things to pay, he better work out on how to going to pay them.
And then
I've missed this guy, so I'm not up on this one. But I'm guessing that he won't be getting much sympathy because generally there isn't sympathy these days for people that dick about. He is,
and people are saying that that he's hello Ian's remembered. He's the other Ian's either remembered it's on, or he's an hour late, or he's been down the pub, or
he's still working on British summertime.
No, I've been waiting for this. You need to be very careful what you say. He's going to out you. He's made threats on his channel just today. He's going to go after anyone who's talked about him. He's going to out you. He's going to post your footage on his channel and out you and get you done as well.
My footage of what?
Exactly. So I'm going to be very careful what I say here, because what I want to say will get me into a lot of trouble. If you look at the history, well, let me just move that so it's actually in the right place. Right, if you look at this guy's channel, he's been doing stuff like 13,000 foot beyond visual line of sites. 13,000 foot. He showed on a Mavic Air 2, flying through the middle of whatever city he's in, next to big buildings, everything. And the reality is they've just been sitting there going, yeah, keep going, fella, keep going, we'll wait, and then they've gone, yeah, that's enough now, we'll rein you back in. I can't say he's done this. He's built up a YouTube channel, 4,500 subs. It's a good number. He's not making money off it. He's got no advertising, but what he's done is out and out posted footage showing him doing completely illegal acts. Now, I blame Bruce. Bruce started all of this. Bruce is to blame for making people not care what they say to the regulator. Bruce's disdain for regulation has led to this kind of thing. So Bruce is fully to blame for this, in my opinion.
Well, that's enough said then, really, isn't it? There's we need to say no more on the matter.
It's made it easy for the regulator, haven't they?
Look, this guy, if you're going, ignore the person. Look, he's a bit extreme. I don't know the bloke. I don't really want to. I have no intention of getting in the middle of this. I've been watching it for a few weeks and staying quiet because I could see it blowing up as he's been on all these channels and he's been going on other channels. And then they set up a GoFundMe page to help him pay the 180 grand that no one's had put money to at the time, I believe. But the reality is he has posted footage which is highly illegal in the US. We can argue all day long that if he'd have flown in Canada, Bruce put a comment, it wouldn't have been illegal, but it doesn't matter. It was illegal in the US. He was promoting it. They've kicked his bottom, to say the least, and there's not going to be any getting out of this. There's going to be no wriggle room on this.
The previous one was the huge one in New York, and they settled. It didn't go to court. The FAA settled with the company, but it was for more money. It was for more money than this guy's facing, and that was the settlement. Now, the other thing I was going to ask Richard. So I thought actually, Ian, because the YouTube, they were also going up. They were saying it was Part 107 infringements because the YouTube channel was monetized. So now I've had an argument with Ash that I would say that they'd probably say it was a commercial flight and he wasn't suitably licensed. So it would be a commercial operation. So here I am, Richard. I'm making some money somehow, and I don't have any form of qualification in the UK. How would the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK look at my flight? Am I a private flyer they're prosecuting for flying commercially, or is it a commercial flight operating without the right paperwork?
Because he's making money from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the definition's quite broad on that. Any commercial gain, or what was the exact term they use in
Valuable consideration,
That's
Richard,
it.
if I
Thank you very
remember.
much. Valuable consideration. Yeah, I looked into this, and valuable consideration is quite well defined in case law in the UK as to it relating to income, financial gain. So if somebody is looking at making some form of financial gain or valuable consideration from whatever it is that they do, they could well be captured by that provision.
Does that make the flight commercial or private?
Commercial. Well, it's the intent, isn't it? There's this big grey area with the CAA that what was your intent at the point of making the flight?
Okay.
For instance, if you were to take a cracking image and the papers come up to you and said, "Can we give you 20 quid for that?" You're pretty much in the clear. If you just went out on a Sunday and took the image and just posted it on Facebook, and one of the papers said, "That's pretty nice, can we have one of them?" and it was a one-off 20 quid, that was deemed okay. However, if you went out with the intention of getting, say, 50 images and emailed them all to the paper and said, "Would you be interested in buying one of these?" then that is then heading down that dodgy road.
I think Ian, intent has a part to play in mitigating what that means. But if the regulator really wanted to take a hardline view and say it doesn't matter if you made £1 from it, that is valuable consideration.
Yeah, because it is that simple, was it? It was any benefit, and people, that can be a pint of beer, that can literally be a pack of carrots tossed through the letterbox, or anything like that.
Oh, Welsh life.
You're muted, Mark. We like watching you move your hands, but we can't hear you. No.
Whatever Ian had earlier, that's UAV Hive, Ian, it's now jumped onto you.
Yes. We're not hearing you, Mark.
Oh.
No.
Sign it. But okay. Look, if you look at this guy while Mark fixes his stuff, look, I didn't see any advertising on his channel. I did have a look at it. There was no advertising, but there's an awful lot of videos. Look, it's a simple reality. If you're going to post online videos showing you doing illegal things, then expect to get a knock on the door. There is a very good reason I very rarely post footage on my channel. It's that simple. It's not because I do illegal things, but I just have no interest in having to explain away stuff all of the time. Literally, I do not post footage anymore.
Yeah. I mean, when I worked for the regulator, I was certainly pointed to a number of different YouTube channels by various interested stakeholders that I looked at. And it could well be the subject of an investigation.
I could technically, my PFCO is finally back in. I thought I had done it, but I hadn't. But it is, I hadn't quite finished it. I thought I'd actually hit the send button on the email, but I hadn't, which was a bit bizarre. So I ended up having to send it, but it is back in. But look, I have my PFCO, and I firmly believe I need it for my channel because my channel is monetized, but I don't post footage anymore. So the catch-22 is actually there's a road for that. But if we look at this guy, he's gone all out fighting. Look, he's done something stupid here. Some of the flights are so bad you would go. I used to manage Facebook groups on behalf of a couple of companies, including the largest drone company for domestic drones in the world. And we would
figure on it.
A three-letter one. I used to help.
3DR.
Yeah.
Oh no, not 3DR.
No, not 3DR. The other one.
No,
However, we would not have allowed that footage to stand because there were certain things that was felt. This is a bad impression, and that's probably why they've done him. It's not. Look, the flights are a small aircraft, but it's the impression he's giving to everyone else that they can go and do it, and that's where they've most likely raised issue here, especially a 13,000 foot beyond visual line of sight flight, unless he's going to tell us he had visual line of sight. Try now, Mark.
No.
Try going out and coming back in. When he comes back in, Gary, don't let him.
Look at the options for voice cancellation, because that's what was doing it for me.
Don't let him back in.
Don't let him back in, yeah.
But yeah, I have been following it, Gary. I've tried to. it's polarized. You've had a number of channels who's gone, oh, this is ridiculous, they're doing him, and you've had a number of channels kicking off. I know Ash is very against him, the guy, what he's done. He shouldn't be doing it. You know, Bruce has put a few comments on there, and I fundamentally blame Bruce.
Yeah, well,
But the funny thing, if it was in this country, it wouldn't be getting any sympathy. In fact, if there was a fundraiser, we'd be doing it for police to do it.
Yeah, and it does show the attitude in the US that there's a large amount of people who do not agree with legislation in any shape or form.
Try again, Mark.
Oh, yeah.
Can you
Yay!
hear me? So in the UK,
You cut, Mark. I can't hear you.
Yeah, it's gone again.
Damn, we should have all done
So
down.
in the UK, come 2021, the commercial aspect is binned completely. So it doesn't matter at all. That's completely dead as of 2021.
Yeah.
So in the UK, you know, I wouldn't fret now. I don't think the CA...
ish. It's not completely dead, is it? It is, but it isn't. Because, well, you can't buy any aircraft that comply. Therefore, if you want to do anything, you basically need a GVC anyway.
Well, no, because you can, because let's face it, Parrot and Naffy, the Manivit Mini...
Yeah, but they're not certified. There's no way...
Doesn't matter.
Would insurance even cover you? If you said you were doing commercial work, even if it did count, if you didn't have the GVC, would they say, well, we're going to give you commercial insurance?
That's now the big question, isn't it? Yeah.
That's the big question. Insurance companies are the big question. A2CFC with the right aircraft, you know, you can work commercially. You don't need any kind of... It's now an operational authorization. It's nothing more than that within general visual
consideration.
So the money aspects is completely gone. You know, there's no word in commercial anymore. It will go.
No, I suppose you're talking about the transitional, aren't you, Mark? That's the thing. You got the transitional classes.
Sorry, transitional.
Yeah. So we got that. Yeah, it's an interesting one. You know, it's an awful lot of money. 180,000 quid. Someone knocked on your door and said, $180,000, and went, we're finding you $180,000. You would be filling your underpants. Let's be honest, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, for sure. But then
you'd be taking your overnight bag to court because you won't be going back home.
Yeah. To be honest, I'd rather go. Lock me up because I'm not paying. I'd rather go down than that. But he, I've watched a couple of his videos tonight. I've gone on his channel. I don't see how he's got any outs here. Some of the footage is out and out. Wow, you're really doing that.
Well, it's 2020. We've been playing this game. When did the first Phantom come along? 2010, 10 years, more than that, isn't it? So we've had 10 years of legislation being talked about, rolled around everywhere about commercial off-the-shelf platforms and restrictions. And if he's ever looked for help for anything, help for how to put a lens cap cover onto something, he'll have noticed something in a forum talking about regulations and stuff like that. To suggest that you don't know about it, I thought that was insane of him to do that. To even suggest that he didn't know it. Even I know that that's not a defence. So that can't. Even I know that can't be a good thing. So I think he's not only he's compounding his problems by what he's saying online. He's got to be very, very careful of what he's saying all over the place. And then I think the act of pulling down videos, if he gets legal advice and they say, oh, no, you shouldn't have said that, and all these videos disappear, then that's probably also a thing that isn't going to go in his favour if suddenly all this evidence disappears. So he's just got to be careful and not say anything. And
he's been very vocal today. Yesterday and today he did a live stream, and he's genuinely threatened to out anyone who has called him out and has gone against him.
Well, that's got to be a clever thing to do. Yeah, I did all the murders. Now don't tell anyone. If you tell anyone, I'll turn around and do you as well.
So you are the gentleman. You are watching this. My name is Bruce Simpson, and the channel is
Yes,
Next
well,
Gen.
hang on. Hang on a minute. Yeah,
Yeah, quick, Gary, come on.
yeah, hang on.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that, Bruce. That was
Yeah,
very
I really
well
do appreciate,
Bruce.
Bruce, what's your thought on that?
You've changed yours, not mine.
No, I'm Bruce. I am the real Bruce.
I'm Spartacus.
Exactly, I am Bruce.
How do you change this name? What do I do? Quick, yeah.
Down the bottom, yeah. Hang on,
Wait.
can I change everyone
I'm
else's?
Spartacus.
We're all Bruce.
I can't change it.
Where do you change it then? I've never found where you change
There's
it.
little 3 dots. It should be next. You should be able to tap the 3 dots and change your name there. Yeah, you can't. If you're gonna, you've got to live by the sword, die by the sword, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know full well. Especially if you're putting a video out that says I flew 30, that infers that you know that you shouldn't fly, doesn't it? Maybe inference again. We've got embarrassed here. Inference isn't a thing. Maybe I don't know.
I don't know who you're talking about, Bruce. I'm Brucey Bonan.
Sorry, Brucey Bonus. that's a very niche reference there, Bruce. But can you infer something in law, or does it have to be fact? I guess it's has to be fact, I suppose.
No, I mean there is. I think depending on the situation, Bruce, I certainly think there is some room for inference in the absence of an admission. So, for example, if for example you maintain the right to remain silent while you are being investigated, that there can be a legitimate piece that says we infer that you are or you have done something because you did not take the opportunity to say to the contrary. So in this guy's case, I mean, in the US, I'm not an attorney, so obviously I couldn't comment on or be in a position to give advice, but pleading the Fifth Amendment and having the right to not self-incriminate might be something that they could pull out of the hat, but I don't see how far that will get that person in view of the evidence that's out there and has been for some time. I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
It's hell of a 5.
Yeah, it's only Ian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Andy's put his Twitter handle there. That's fantastic. You and Barrett. Get Ian on Twitter.
Yeah.
In the UK, so interestingly, in the UK, the CIA have basically said it's now for the police to investigate. We watch. This is our thing. This is what we're doing. That's police deal with that.
That, Mark, is where I have a bit of a problem, because why do we need police powers when it comes to PFCO holders? When you look on the bottom of your permit for authorization, it says we have the power to revoke, rescind, or amend your permission.
Yeah.
So why do we actually need these powers for PFCO holders? You don't, because the CIA has the powers in any event.
Yeah, so Article 253, isn't it? Now, interestingly, it's because of the new stuff that's coming out. So all the ATCFC flags and all that kind of stuff, because the CIA is basically kind of washing its hands with the open category to a degree. It's going, the police can deal with all those problems. We don't really want to know much about that.
You're implying to do something now there with that. Even now with the YouTube channels and so on.
Oh,
no one seems to really care.
Well, I've put a link in the chat that we can all see, and so just we can see it. I've not put it in the public one, but if you watch that, he gives his operator ID and flyer ID, right, and it's quite clear that he's not flying into the rules. But nothing will happen to the guy. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. In the UK, for X number of years, it's been a good while. I think it was only initially the very early days of drone use where we saw people done for what they'd done on YouTube. It just seemed, well, make a couple of examples, and then that was it. And then it was passed to the police, and the police say that they are not allowed access to social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc. For the potential that they could get malware onto the police systems. So they say categorically we will not view these things. And if you raise any of the cases,
Wow.
9 times out of 10, it will be closed the next day. So they'll just close it and nothing will happen.
Now,
and the only time that seems to differ is if you have a drone team in that particular city and they're particularly internet savvy and on with it, and they see an opportunity to do something with it, which just that's a very tiny part of the UK, and for the rest of it, we're really not interested. And to an extent, you can understand it with the police because you've got burglary and other things that will be seen as higher priority, and if nothing's happened as a consequence, they're just not going to do anything about it. But it does make a whole farce of all the legislation and keep adding to the legislation when we don't do anything with it. And as long as we say the police are going to looking after it, nothing is going to happen with it ever.
Well, we had it in London. You had the Danny Boy guy who was involved in the hacking scene on the Mavic, and he was posting all sorts of things up. When the firmware hacks first landed for the DJI aircraft, there was a bit of a scene and one or two people posting some very dodgy footage. And the police weren't interested. The police had no interest. I think he got a knock on the door in the end, but for the amount of data he was putting on the internet, you could easily have done him within existing laws, yet it was almost impossible for anyone to actually get them to even listen.
But how can you prove it?
If it was a dash cam footage of a car overtaking you on a single white line, the police would be on it so hot it would be unbelievable. That car and that person will get the biggest fine they've ever had and biggest shock they've ever had if you caught it on dash cam. So,
but then the dash cam. Oh, well, actually, we said the person here. A much better place to argue this than me. But surely, if you have proof that dash cam was in car X and car Y, there's the registration plate, and you are legally obliged as owner of car registration plate, whatever, to say who was driving that car, then you've got all the parts of it. Whereas
I think,
with drone footage,
just go back. You're right with the if you put cars breaking the law on YouTube gets dealt with, but I think that's just purely because you have got your traffic police, and it'll be them that's doing it because they're dedicated to dealing with traffic, to traffic crimes. They've actually got an incentive to do it. Where if that was left down to the general police that have got all the other crimes to deal with, I bet that probably wouldn't even get dealt with. And that's where it kind of falls down in that there aren't big enough drone teams for that. The drone teams there are to look after drones that the police are using. They're not there to police drone offences. And that's really, I guess, where this kind of falls down. I think... I don't understand why the CA, we don't arrange it with the police, why we don't just have a spin-off national team. Because it only has to be a small team. Stick in front of them on YouTube, leave them at it all day. There'll be enough work there to keep them going at least a year before they've even started.
We've got ourselves another job. Here's another job.
Yeah, it's funny, Ian. You've said that, and you could have one guy in an office for the whole of the country, and he would still be able to make an impact because of social media. And you'd only have to go through and then contact the local force and just say, look, I've invited this person down for an interview. Yeah, can you give him a once over, please? And one person can make a difference, as you say, and it does not have to be local.
With the traffic example, Ian, I think one fundamental piece of that is that the police are very familiar with the law and are quite clear on being able to prosecute because they're very comfortable with the law and they know what to do. They've got the evidence there to demonstrate how somebody has breached whatever specific traffic law that may apply. When it comes to drones, they're not that familiar with it. They can't get to grips with it in the way that we guys do because we're involved with it all the time. And the other thing that might be of interest would be the fact that it's probably not a metric by which the police are measured in terms of prosecutions yet. So there's no real interest to come at it from a point of view of this is a metric that we need to be really visible on in terms of prosecutions, like we see in London with all the knife crimes. We know how many knife crimes there are. We know how many murders there are, or rapes, or burglaries, and everything else. There's no this is the amount of drone incursions that the police have prosecuted this month or investigated this month. There's none of that. We're not seeing that yet. But I think that will come after the drone bill's put in place, because there will be a positive obligation for them to then do it, because they can be able to demonstrate how much money they have in terms of fines received. So that's a clear, measurable metric that they can employ, as well as how many prosecutions or investigations that they've put in place, much like we do with other crime.
Yeah, quick question. Where do the fines go? Who pockets
Back into the
those?
Hooking government.
Oh, see, if the police force get to keep
So they
it.
might
It'd be a
probably
different
get a
matter.
proportion of it, I would imagine, like they do with fines at the moment. I think with traffic fines, I may be completely wrong on this, but I think the police get a proportion of it, but also, the government gets a proportion of it to a time where it needs to go. That's my understanding.
No, if it's a proportion of, then there'll be some incentive. Because I thought if you just go straight to central government, you would just be like being a taxman for them, and there wouldn't be that much incentive.
Yeah.
So when one of us gets the job to watch YouTube, obviously, being this group, we've got to make a push for like chocolate hot knobs have got to be in or chocolate digestives have got to be in the package. And then what we could do is, when we send off Bobby to someone, we could say, Richard, look, Richard, for a small fee, here's a person you need to be going and representing now. And we could then bite at both ends of this cherry here.
Okay.
I like
So we're talking, it's got to be, well, I was going to say, for me, it's got to be at least 42 grand a year, and I want a company car. So that's the start. And then, Richard, I'm going to want at least 500 quid in a brown envelope for every client I push towards you. Okay.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
And don't forget, you need to keep some metrics of where the problems are, and then sell that to a counter UAS company, so they can then go and promote their wares.
And then we can pull in the data from our receiver system for remote ID that we've got. In fact, that's what we can actually do. That's how we'll do it.
And then
what we do when we've stood up the things, first of all, we'll say, Rich, look out for this one. This is going to come your way eventually. Then we're going to say, Ian, watch out for the video because he's coming. And then we'll know, using criminal analytics, as it were, we'll know ahead of the game who we're going for, where we're finding them, where we're flying them, and who's representing them. That's going to be easy.
The big money comes when you do get to the gear and you find the guy's got some good images. You can flog them to the papers behind the closed doors as well. Because when he's been flying over Sandringham and all of those places, you know what, they're going to have done it. He's down by Windsor, Legoland, having a look over. Oh, there's Camilla out there in his Spartacus or whatever it is she wears.
Far too much information coming to you. It's just rolling off the tongue a little bit too quickly. But the horrible thing is, as much as I'm joking about that, there are people out there now thinking about this sort of thing, and there are some buggers that are going to come into this industry with that sort of mindset, and they're everywhere. And we can't make it too easy for things like remote ID and all this other stuff. We are going to make it easy for the devils. Ranty hat. Can you tell? I've had a couple of weeks of seeing people. I can see what they're doing. I can see how they're going to try and rip people off, and it just annoys me. And you jump up and down, but other people say, no, rubbish. But I come back in 5 years and let's have another chat. That's how it's going to be.
It does annoy me when you go on about, we're heading potentially to pay per flight, and people go, don't be daft. And you go, there's marketing videos a year ago in the US where those exact models, someone's gone to the trouble of having a marketing team put a video together. It's like, no, these people, it's in their heads. They would love to monetize the sky in that manner. And unfortunately, it hits everyone.
But that's what remote ID is, isn't it? It's selling the devices as well. It's not just the monetizing. It's selling your bolt-on device to do that.
See, my worry with it, now just a simple database ended up in so much money. You just end up with these bloated amounts of money for these systems, and then everybody has to shoulder the cost, and that's the thing. If this was all efficient and a minor cost, it wouldn't be so annoying to handle, apart from the data side, which I think is a very important one as well. I think actually it was I said Equifax earlier. I think it's Experian. It's actually is it with the drone database, but both the in fact I worked for a time in Credit Vetted, and I know how the systems are, and the data's passed around in databases in free text, not even encrypted. Or it was like 10 years ago. It all dated back to mainframes. So, you know, data's going around about people, and it's not, you know, when you look how the NHS, for example, would deal with it, it really is decades behind. So I think that, you know, there are genuine worries, and I think both Equifax and Experian have both been caught out with, Equifax especially, with huge data breaches and losses of customer information, even when even on the US side, and it had UK records in there that were affected. So, yeah, and
all of this sort of
in
relies on.
Europe, you seem to get quite badly done when you lose data, but it seems in the US that they don't. From what I've seen so far, they don't seem to get jumped on quite as much. There's always the thought of, oh, you know, we don't want to overfine our companies too much. Where in Europe, it's a little bit more scary, and scary in that way is quite well. It is quite good, really, because you need data to be, that's the serious thought about keeping this secure. And the whole drone ID thing was starting with this of, things would be open standards, which is good in a way, but there's also a fact of, how easy is this going to be to copy and to clone, and so I've got my main worry is about having it cloned and someone doing something naughty and you get pulled up for it, because I don't want it being seen like DNA, like this is solid. We've got this piece of digital information, and that definitely puts you there. Without them actually using that digital information to go and find you with the sticks in your hand and then do you, that's fair enough. But my worry is just everything being done remotely, just for the fact that you could have two drones flying in the same area. One's misbehaving, they're both the same model, and only one of them's registered and doing the drone ID, and it'll be that person that ends up getting pulled and being fined. And it's that worries me with the digital data, because even when people say, well, you've got number plates on cars and they can be cloned, but it's like, yes, but the police, if you did a bank robbery in a car with a clone reg, it's still the bank robbery car that the police are chasing with the driver in, that they're going to pull over and catch in the act, or get the DNA off the car and then prosecute it. They're not just going to look at a registration plate and think, oh, we're not even going to bother chasing him, we know who the registration plate is, we'll just send an officer around to the house. There's the actual pursuit and actually finding the person, where I worry when things get into digital data in the sky, it's just, no, the records say it, computer says it was you, it's you. So I've just been a quick rant on that.
Well, where I wanted to take that a little bit is, when even I teach primary school children or talk to adults about it, and I don't have a sensible answer because people will say, I don't break any laws, I don't do anything dodgy, so why should I care about who has my data? So I don't have a really succinct answer for that. So can anyone help me with a succinct answer for that?
The problem is, you can be as nice as you want, you can follow all the rules you want. It doesn't mean that I'm going to behave and not steal your data and misuse it at any point in time.
Yes, that's a good one. Yes, it can be misused.
There's nothing, I want to do something, it's going to be naughty, screw this, I'm just going to clone your stuff and I'm going to go and do it. And I don't give a rat's.
Well,
I just don't care about you. I'm sorry.
These Find My Ancestor sites and things like that, and now they're offering you DNA tests to help you find your ancestor, which seemingly seems like a nice thing to do. They're selling your DNA information on then to medical companies because they can look for any pre-existing conditions using your DNA, and that's all part of that. So you're signing up for one. It's bait and switch, isn't it? Almost, I suppose.
My concern is I don't want my personal data being handled by anyone else that's not using it in a way that I've consented to, and that's what GDPR is all about. My data belongs to me, doesn't belong to anybody else, and that's the different view that they have in the US. The company may own the data, not the person. But that's gradually changing. California's privacy laws are making serious advances at the moment. But in the EU position, to Ian's point, is that GDPR is a much more complex piece of regulation that goes into the finer detail, that impose stronger fines. If you're facing a fine of 4% of your global turnover, that's significant. And when people say to you, Gary, I don't care about my data, I've got nothing to hide, they can have it. Well, you'll only say that up until the point that your data has been compromised and something's happened to you.
Yes.
Which is the Experian Equifax point, when somebody now starts replicating your credit data, and suddenly you're getting county court judgments through the door, and you can't get a loan or a credit card and everything else. And suddenly it's now starting to hit you personally in a way that's now going to take years for you to get your credit file amended before you can do anything. I mean, the whole piece can be quite significant and detrimental to you if somebody's got your data and they're using it in the wrong way.
Well, there's one of our number that I know. I won't name him, but his bank last week declared him dead and cancelled everything, and it was someone of the same name as him, and he has had a week of trying to prove he's alive, which is just insane, isn't it? So there's data gone mad, I suppose.
Yeah, and I'd be concerned when I'm flying a drone that it might be the same as somebody else's, and if somebody else is flying a drone, and you're right, I think you're right, Ian. I think it's right on the money there. The police are going to come to the easier target, and if that's me because I'm complicit, I've registered, and they've got all my details, that's exactly where they're going to go. They're not going to go anywhere else because it's too much work. Too difficult, or they don't understand what they're doing. And and you're there in your luminous vest with your cones around, you've got a 30-meter zone for your landing and takeoff site and everything else. It's clear who you are and what you're doing. Oh, hang on a minute, you must be the drone operator. That's because the police only have to reasonably believe that you're flying in a way that's not complicit with the law. And as long as they reasonably believe that, then they must be right.
And thinking back, although this is jumping over to the US, on this very channel, you had the bloke in the US where he hadn't committed any crime. He was flying quite correctly, and it was a law enforcement, I think, neighbour that he'd had that took issue with him flying his drone and showed that he got the book thrown at him. And even though he had the logs on the drone, completely proved he's innocent, had to go all the way through court, and I think there it was some solicitors working pro bono helping him out that got him at the end of it, free of the charges, but he had to go for years.
No, they pulled him back in. He got charged. They pulled him back in. He got done. Another lot. It got all set up again, and he got done. He got through it and then was dragged back right through it again. And he was dragged back, and it got done. Yeah. It was over there. That's the one over the dogs, wasn't it? Over the kennels, the alleged kennels at the end of the thing, which was the law enforcement dogs or something like that. And yes, I can't remember his name now, but that's a couple of years ago. We like to be ahead with these things, don't we? And as far as remote ID goes, I have a subtle feeling if it goes through in the open format of a Wi-Fi transmission standard that anyone with an app can see, that we will have to stand up a group of receivers here and just show the authority what a poor idea it is. Well, we're going to have to do something like that. So we are then. This is what we're doing. This is the data we're gathering. Do you really think this is a good idea? Because they must be able to see this coming. They must.
I think, I don't know if it was Mark that said it earlier, but I think there's a very genuine one with the commercial operation of stealing clients. I mean, if I was a commercial operator, I genuinely would be like, oh, that's a bit concerning, because it depends on the distance of these as well. Because I think with even with the aeroscope, I think it's like over a mile or even a couple of miles. You could actually see what's going on within your good range of your locality, and really keep tabs on what people are doing and where jobs are going on, and that gives you a kind of commercial advantage that you shouldn't really have.
Wouldn't it be a self-convention? under the Wireless Telegraphy Act for interception.
To intercept it. Well, that would be an interesting thing, wouldn't it? Because how can you have an open standard that anybody can receive, but it's open, but not for you? how could you have that open broadcast standard, which is what it's supposed to be?
I've done quite a bit of work around the Wireless Telegraphy Act from a counter-drone point of view, and I think there's arguments on both sides around the legitimate use of it. I mean, primarily it depends on what the use is, but that piece of law was all about, back in the day, you cannot copy a radio station or a TV station or set one up yourself, much like the old Radio Caroline days, that kind of stuff. That's what the Act was all about. It was never about interfering with a wireless signal from a receiver to a drone. It was never about that. And part of the Act is all about, if you capture an image, then you are potentially going to fall foul of the Act. But when we interfere with a Wi-Fi signal, we're not looking to capture an image. We're just looking to interfere with a signal.
Oh, you say interfere, I say receive.
Yeah.
That'd
be an interesting one.
Well, it's I mean, it's if it can be received, it will be received. If it's in a clear and an open standard, someone will decode it, regardless of the implications of the law. If we choose to stood up saying, and then we might have to face the wrath of the law, but maybe we'll just keep quiet about it, and as I say, feed clients into you, and whichever is chosen to watch YouTube all day. It's great business. It's great business. It'll go really, really well, and we will try and shut down counter UAS businesses, because obviously they'll ruin our trade if they work.
We've said it before, but I'll just say it again as I'm on the subject. I mean, most drone flyers wouldn't have an issue with drone ID if it was just the police that would use it, if it was just for enforcement, of genuine nuisance, and the data that we're providing is secure. So the idea, but already, even when it was muted a few years ago, it was already talking about, and what if a council work had it? So someone's already thought, who else are we going to give this data on to? And that's where it worries me. It shouldn't be going on any further. If you say this is where it's going, and also that we're not going to have some over-bloated, really expensive system and you're all shouldering the costs. It's free and it's just with the police, not a problem. But when you're saying this is costing you money and it's going XXX and, where's it going to end up? We said before, is this going to be ending up with councils?
It will.
Using their bylaws to fine you?
It will. This is the thin end of the wedge. When I talked earlier about some of the legislation that's in the pipeline, especially from EASA, you're going to have the EU piece. They're going to want to know the data. Then you're going to have the national piece. They're going to want to know the data. Then you're going to have your cities and regions. They're going to want to know the data, and that will include local councils. It absolutely will. So once we've gone through the gate, they've now got permission to have our data. It's now up to them how they deal with it.
And the thing that frustrates with that is it all just comes down to this perception that the drone industry makes lots of money. Let's milk it. I mean, you see it with councils now because they're making policy based on revenue it can get them. So we're seeing city centres destroyed where they're allowing conversions of all the buildings into flats because that gets the money for council tax, even though most of those are being empty, and then it's creating slums for the future. And then they're taxing car drivers and doing congestion charges. And what it's really about is we've got some ways of getting revenue off people so that, because our council tax might be capped by government, we can't do it more than 5%, let's get all these other revenue streams. And if then drones are on that, you're guaranteed they're going to be like, we've got this park, you're currently allowed to fly a drone on it. We're going to change that. We're going to say you can't fly a drone on it, and if you do, you're going to get a fine. And that's what I'll do. The places that are all able to fly now will all just be closed, and you'll be fined for flying anywhere near them.
Yeah, I mean, that's only for takeoff and landing at the moment that they can charge. But once we start charging for airspace, they've got to come into conflict with the ICAO principle that airspace must be equitable for all users. And that's fundamental, really, and has been for decades. So at what point do we say that that is no longer the case? Because once you start putting a fee in place, that's a barrier to people that want to use that airspace.
Yeah, I mean, it's taking a step back from that. I think that's a very valid one for commercial operators, and will we end up going down that road? And there'll be people pushing to go down that road for certain. But I'm thinking with for the hobby users, they really do depend on council parks where they don't have the bylaws or they don't enforce them and let them fly now. All these little spaces, and we're seeing those gradually getting eked away just out of the fear of the bad drone stories, like Leicester Council, and I think there's been Nottingham and Newcastle and whoever else that have just said no, we're just banning drones. They've got no good reason. They're just thinking it's easier just to ban them. And that's been bad enough, but when people start thinking, and we can get some money out of it, that's only going to make matters worse. And then I say, well, hobbyists, it's not about overflight, it's about where can I actually take off? Because you're saying, you've got to be 150 metres away from, built up area, and then you've got to have your 50 metres or 30 metres or whatever takeoff spaces. And all that means you're not just going to be able to take off from somewhere small that you're usually relying on public land, council lands, because that's where they tend to be big playing fields or whatever where you're able to fly. So, and then the moment you stop hobbyists coming in, you're stopping commercial operators in the future. So one impacts the other in time.
Well, in America, they've already got, the provision that, yes, you'll be able to fly from AMA fields, and we're not going to add any more. And if there's a new AMA field, it's I can't remember when that's about to come in. I can't remember when that actually comes in. But then once that's enacted, that's it. These are the AMA or approved fields, and that's it. And no more will be allowed. So some of them will get built on. Some of them will fall under some provisions of, some sort of UTM that says suddenly you can't do it, or a local council that says you can't do it, and it's going to just ever shrink. It bewilders me why that is even in their way of thinking. But there we are. There we are. Look, now we've gone over 2 hours. I'm going to go to bed.
I think you've got to put the Gatwick drone music video on.
Hang on. Yeah, send it. Why don't you send me the link? Because now I'm sat at a different place. Hang on.
Let me find it. Bear with me.
Hang on, I might even find it on. I sent it to. Somebody have a chat while I'm finding this link.
Well, I mean, finally on remote ID. Personally, if we have it, Manned Aviation can have it. I'm happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Well, that's equitable airspace story, isn't it?
Right. And let's charge on size of the aircraft flying. So the heavier it is, the bigger it is, the more it pays. Because I only weigh 1.4 kilos, up to 25 kilos. So my flight should cost next to nothing. But that Cessna that wants to fly over, that weighs I'm quite happy for them to pay a little bit more.
Yeah. Have I just cut you off with this music, or am I about to? Well, let's play out with this music. Gentlemen, what I'm going to do, that's almost going to seem like this was prepared and thought about, maybe. But this is a song by Roper Band, who have a massive 10 subscribers, Drone Panic, and it was in response to the Gatwick incident image. And hopefully it plays, and hopefully you can hear it. But I will wish you a very good evening. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, dear viewer, wherever you might be in the world. Thank you, gentlemen, and I look forward to seeing you all next week when we have to call Richard back because that American chap getting a huge fine is coming after us all. So we'll have to get our barrister, our friendly barrister on.
Bruce, my name is Bruce X.
My name is Bruce. Yeah. Bruce, and Bruce. Just tell me, can you hear this?
We'll see in a second.
Can you hear the audio on it?
No, not yet. No, we can see the video, can't hear the audio.
Yeah, see, that's where this didn't work. All right, let's stop it and try again. This is a setting for sharing the audio. Maybe I can't play that. All right, I'll just put the link in the comments. That's what I'll do. I'll put the link in the comments.
I
Don't
think you
panic.
are thinking it yourself, Gary.
Well, yeah, that's a good thing to do. Right, here comes the music. There it is. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Dear viewers, wherever you are in the world, thank you very much. Be safe. Wear a mask. Wash your hands. Stay away from other people. Be like us. Have no friends. See you all next week. Take care. Look after yourselves. Cheers all. Bye bye.